The twin sons of Tatooine had seen many strange things fall from the sky. Slave ships, crash pod racers, the occasional bounty hunter who miscalculated a landing burn and became a cautionary tale spread across the Dune Sea. But on this particular afternoon, in the 41st year of the Galactic Republic's slow unraveling, what fell from the sky above Mos Espa was something the desert had no category for. There was no ship, no engine fire, no sonic boom from a hull burning through atmosphere. There was simply a figure, descending through cloudless blue at a controlled, unhurried pace, as though falling were a choice rather than a consequence. It landed in the market district between a moisture vendor's stall and a Rodian spice merchant's cart, sending up a modest plume of amber dust. It stood. It looked around, and then it walked, calmly, methodically, with the precise gait of something that had never once in its existence needed to hurry, toward the nearest source of shade. The Rodian screamed. The moisture vendor ran. Three Jawas watched from a distance with their glowing eyes, making rapid calculations about salvage value. Anakin Skywalker, 9 years old, covered in engine grease up to both elbows, watched from the gap between two market stalls with his jaw hanging open. He had seen droids his entire life. He had built one. C-3PO currently stood in various stages of incompletion in the small space that passed for his bedroom, a project of genuine love assembled from salvaged parts over 3 years of patient work. Anakin knew droids. He knew their gaits, their optical sensors, the particular way their servos whirred under load, the subtle tells that separated a well-maintained unit from one running on prayer and corrosion. This was not like any droid he had ever seen. The figure was humanoid in the most complete sense, not the approximation of humanism that most droids achieved, but something that made the eye insist it was looking at a person and only slowly, reluctantly, begin to revise that assessment. Its skin was pale gold in the harsh Tatooine light. Its eyes, when it turned in Anakin's direction, were a deep amber yellow, calm and utterly without aggression. It wore a black uniform of unfamiliar cut, slightly scorched at the shoulders, and it moved through the panicking market crowd as though the panic were a minor weather event, noted, categorized, irrelevant to its current objectives. It stopped. It looked directly at Anakin. "You are not afraid," it said. Its voice was measured, precise, carrying a faint resonance that was almost but not quite human. That is statistically unusual given the current behavioral patterns of the surrounding population. Anakin stepped out from between the stalls. "You're not like any droid I've ever seen." "I am not, strictly speaking, a droid," the figure said. "I am an android." The distinction is meaningful, though I acknowledge it may not be immediately relevant to your situation. "My name is Data, Commander Data, though the rank is perhaps no longer applicable, given that my ship no longer exists and my crew is," a brief pause. Something moving behind those amber eyes, no longer accessible to me. Anakin wiped his hands on his tunic without thinking. "I'm Anakin. Anakin Skywalker." He looked up at the sky, then back at the figure. "How did you get here?" "I didn't see a ship." "That," Data said, "is a question I find myself unable to answer with complete satisfaction. I was elsewhere. Then I was here." The transition was instantaneous and involved an entity whose motivations I have learned, over many years of acquaintance, to accept as fundamentally opaque. He tilted his head slightly. "Are you familiar with the concept of an omnipotent being who intervenes in the lives of others for purposes that occasionally appear whimsical?" Anakin thought about it. "The Force kind of works like that sometimes." Data considered this. "An interesting parallel. I will have to explore it further." They stood in the settling dust of the emptied market square. The android who had fallen from nowhere and the boy who dreamed of leaving, and looked at each other with the particular recognition of two beings who have never quite fit the world they were born into. "You need somewhere to go," Anakin said. It wasn't a question. "I require orientation," Data agreed. "I have no local currency, no knowledge of this planet's geography, political structure, or social customs. And my navigational database contains no reference to this star system whatsoever. I am, by any reasonable assessment, entirely without resources." "You can come to our place," Anakin said. "My mom won't mind." He paused. "She won't. Once she sees you're not going to hurt anyone." "Are you going to hurt anyone?" "I have no intention of doing so." "Good." Anakin grinned, that wide, unguarded grin that would one day break the hearts of people who remembered it. Come on then. I'll show you the way. And you can tell me how you work. I've never seen a positronic matrix before, but I've read about them and I have some questions. Data fell into step beside him. I have found, he said, that individuals who begin a conversation with technical questions about my construction are generally the most interesting people I encounter. Anakin laughed. The twin suns moved toward the horizon. The desert, indifferent and eternal, absorbed them both. If you want to see more crossover characters dropped into the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop a name in the comments below. Who should arrive next? May the Force be with you. Shmi Skywalker had survived a great many things in her life. Slavery, the outer rim, the particular exhaustion of raising a gifted child in conditions designed to extinguish giftedness before it could become inconvenient to anyone. With a profit motive, she had developed, through necessity, a finely calibrated instinct for threat assessment, the ability to look at something new and determine, within seconds, whether it meant harm to her son. She looked at Data standing in her doorway for a long moment. You can stay, she said, but you sleep outside. Data accepted this with a respectful inclination of his head. That arrangement is entirely satisfactory. I do not sleep. Shmi paused. Of course you don't. She handed him a bowl of food anyway, out of habit, and he accepted it with both hands and a genuine expression of gratitude. And she decided she liked him without fully understanding why. That was the first night. By the third night, Anakin was sneaking out of bed 2 hours after his mother fell asleep to sit with Data in the narrow strip of shadow behind their small home, where the desert cooled rapidly and the stars came out in their millions. And the two of them would talk until the first pale lightning of the eastern sky forced Anakin back inside. Data answered every question. This was, in Anakin's experience, unprecedented. Adults answered some questions. They deflected others. They occasionally told him he was too young, or that he would understand when he was older, or that some things were better left alone. Watto never answered questions that didn't relate to profitable labor. Even his mother, who answered more than most, had limits, places she would not go because the territory was too painful or too uncertain or simply beyond her knowledge. Data had no such limits. He answered with complete honesty, complete detail, and zero condescension. Why do people own other people? Anakin asked on the fourth night. He asked it the way children ask the most devastating questions. Simply, directly, without preamble. Data was quiet for 0.4 seconds. Throughout recorded history across many civilizations, the practice has arisen whenever a sufficiently powerful group determined that the labor and autonomy of another group could be extracted without consequence. The justifications vary: economic, cultural, philosophical, but the underlying mechanism is consistent. Power without accountability produces exploitation. That's not a reason. That's just how it happens. You are correct. I misspoke. There is no adequate reason. There are only causes and consequences. Anakin pulled his knees to his chest. Do you think it's wrong? Yes, Data said, without hesitation, unambiguously. No one had ever said that to him before. Not like that. Not without qualification or whispered caution or the furtive look of someone checking to make sure no one important was listening. Anakin stored the word, unambiguously, and turned it over in his mind like a smooth stone, feeling its weight. Are you afraid of anything? He asked on the seventh night. Data considered this with what Anakin had come to recognize as his genuine processing expression, a slight stillness, the amber eyes tracking something internal. I do not experience fear in the biological sense. I have an emotion chip that provides me with functional analogs to emotion. I can experience something that resembles concern, or discomfort, or what I believe may be grief. But fear, as you experience it, the physiological cascade, the narrowing of cognition, the impulse toward flight, this is not available to me. Is that good or bad? I have spent a considerable portion of my existence attempting to answer that question. Data looked up at the stars. I believe it is neither. It is simply what I am. Fear serves a biological function. It protects, but it also distorts. It makes the threat appear larger than it is. It makes loss feel inevitable before it has occurred. He paused. I have observed that beings who fear losing something often make choices that ensure they lose it. Anakin was quiet for a long time. My mom is afraid I'll never be free. And you? I'm afraid I'll leave and never come back. He said it fast, like it had been waiting behind his teeth. I want to leave more than anything. And I'm afraid of wanting it that much. Data turned to look at him. Those two things, he said carefully, are not in conflict. You can want something and be uncertain of its cost. That is not weakness. That is clarity. A pause. What concerns me more is this. You speak of leaving as though it would require you to become someone different from who you are now. Wouldn't it? Change is inevitable. Transformation is not. Data's voice was precise, but not cold. There was something in it that Anakin would later struggle to name. Some quality that sat in the space between warmth and accuracy. The question is not whether you will change. The question is whether you will remain. Beneath the change, recognizably yourself. Anakin looked at him. How do you stay yourself when everything around you changes? I find, Data said, that I ask the question frequently. The asking, I have come to believe, is more important than the answer. Beings who stop asking who they are have generally already begun to lose the answer. The stars wheeled slowly overhead. In the slave quarters around them, Tatooine slept its exhausted, defeated sleep. Anakin sat with an android from another galaxy entirely and felt, for the first time in his life, that someone was speaking to him as though his questions deserved the full weight of a serious answer. He did not yet know what that would mean to him. He did not yet know how long he would carry these nights, or how desperately he would need them later when the questions grew heavier and the answers grew darker, and there was no one left who would simply tell him the truth. He only knew that for the first time in a long time, he was not afraid of the dark. Kagan. Jin had felt many disturbances in the Force across his long career as a Jedi Master. He had felt the cold void of a Sith's presence, the bright flare of a Force-sensitive child, the subtle wrongness of a trap laid with patience and malice. He had learned to trust these feelings the way a navigator trusts instruments, not blindly, but with the earned confidence of long experience. What he felt when he walked into the slave quarters of Mos Espa 3 days after landing on Tatooine was something he had no instrument for. It was not a darkness. It was not a light. It was an absence, a shape in the Force defined entirely by what was not there. The way a statue's shadow tells you everything about the statue's form without revealing its material. Something existed in this quarter that the Force moved around rather than through, the way a river moves around a stone. Kagan stopped walking. He stood in the narrow street and extended his senses carefully, the way a man extends a hand into unknown water. The absence was calm. It was precise, and it was, inexplicably, sitting behind a slave's home, teaching a 9-year-old boy the principles of ethical philosophy. He found them without difficulty. The boy he already knew, he had seen him race, had felt the staggering strength of his Force presence like standing too close to a sun. The figure beside the boy was something else entirely. Pale gold in the afternoon light, utterly still, watching Qui-Gon's approach with amber eyes that contained no hostility and no fear and, most disturbingly, no Force signature whatsoever. You're the Jedi, Anakin said, scrambling to his feet. From the ship, the one who was with the Queen. I am, Kagan said, but his eyes remained on Data. And your companion? This is Data, Anakin said, with the proprietary pride of someone introducing a discovery they made first. He's from another galaxy. He fell from the sky. He doesn't sleep, and he can answer any question, and he's faster than any human, and he doesn't have the Force, but he's the smartest person I've ever met. Data inclined his head. Commander Data, the introduction is largely accurate, though I would refine another galaxy to another universe entirely, as the distinction has implications for navigational recovery. He studied Kagan with calm, systematic attention. You are a Jedi Knight. I have learned a considerable amount about your order from Anakin over the past several days. You perceive the Force as flowing through all living things, and you use it as both a spiritual framework and a practical tool. You have come to Tatooine for reasons connected to your ship's hyperdrive, and you have discovered Anakin's potential. A pause. You intend to take him with you. Kagan was quiet for a moment. You read people well for someone who cannot feel the Force. I observe, Data said simply. The conclusions follow. Obi-Wan arrived 20 minutes later, slightly out of breath, having been sent to find his master when Kagan failed to return from his walk at the expected time. He stopped at the edge of the small courtyard, looked at Data, and reached for the force in the automatic way of a man checking whether his weapon is loaded. Nothing. The figure registered as empty space, as furniture, as stone. Master, Obi-Wan said carefully. What is that? Rude, Anakin said. I am not offended, Data said. The question is reasonable. I am an android, a synthetic being of artificial construction with a positronic brain, capable of independent thought and genuine emotion. I am not alive in the biological sense your force appears to require for detection. Yet I am not simply a program machine. I occupy, as several philosophers in my home universe have noted, a somewhat inconvenient category. Obi-Wan looked at his master. Qui-Gon's expression was the one Obi-Wan had learned to recognize over years of apprenticeship, the look of a man who had encountered something the Council's orthodoxy had not prepared him for and was deciding how to proceed anyway. The Council will want to know about this, Obi-Wan said. The Council, Kagan replied, will want to know about many things from this planet. We will address them in order. He settled himself onto a low stone bench, with the ease of a man who meditates in inconvenient places as a matter of professional habit. Data, you have been speaking with Anakin for several days. What is your assessment of him? Data processed the question with evident seriousness. He is exceptionally intelligent. I estimate his cognitive processing speed to be in the highest percentile for his species and age. He is empathetic to a degree that occasionally causes him distress. He is deeply attached to his mother in ways he has not yet found language for. And this attachment coexists with a powerful desire for freedom that he experiences as guilt. Another pause. He is afraid, underneath everything else, of being left behind. And he is afraid, somewhat contradictorily, of what he might become if he is not. The courtyard was very quiet. Kagan looked at the boy. Anakin had gone very still in the way of children, who were being discussed, accurately in their presence and do not know whether to be grateful or mortified. Those are, Kagan said slowly, perceptive observations. He told me most of them himself, Data said. He simply did not recognize them as a pattern. Children rarely do. They require someone to reflect what they have said back to them with sufficient clarity, that the shape becomes visible. He looked at Anakin. You are not broken, Anakin. You are complex. They are not the same thing. Anakin swallowed, said nothing. Obi-Wan, who had expected this mission to involve a hyperdrive part and a quick departure, sat down slowly beside his master and tried to recalibrate his expectations of the afternoon. You cannot come with us, Kagan said to Data, not unkindly. The Council's reaction to Anakin will be complicated enough. Arriving with a being of unknown origin who is invisible to the Force would. I have no intention of accompanying you, Data said. My purpose here, insofar as I am able to determine it, is not the Jedi Order. It is Anakin. He turned those amber eyes on the boy with an expression that was not quite warmth and not quite calculation, but something that lived with precision in the territory between them. And I believe I have said most of what I came to say. What remains can be delivered briefly. Kagan looked at him for a long moment. In the Force, the android remained invisible, that impossible stone in river absence. And yet something in the Master's long experience told him that absence was not emptiness, that sometimes the Force placed things it could not touch, precisely where they needed to be. Say it then, Kagan said. Data turned to Anakin. The words Data spoke in that small courtyard were not dramatic. They were not delivered with the weight of prophecy or the grandeur of a Jedi pronouncement. They came the way Data delivered everything, with careful precision, without ornament, without the protective softening that adults typically applied to difficult truths when speaking to children. You will be trained, Data said. You will become powerful. These things are not in question. I have observed enough of your capability in a few days to understand that your potential is not ordinary. What is in question is what you will do with that power when the things you love are threatened. He paused. And they will be threatened, Anakin. Everything you love will, at some point, be placed in danger. This is not pessimism. This is the nature of attachment in a universe that does not guarantee outcomes. Anakin stared at him. So what do I do? You remember, Data said. That fear of loss and love itself are not the same thing. They feel identical in the moment of crisis. They are not. Love is what you feel when someone exists. Fear of loss is what you feel when you imagine them not existing. One expands you. The other, a careful pause, contracts you, makes you smaller, makes you capable of things the larger version of yourself would refuse. Kagan was very still on his bench. Obi-Wan had stopped breathing. In the careful way of a man who recognizes that something important is happening and does not wish to disturb it. I don't understand the difference, Anakin said. Not really. I know, Data said. You are 9 years old, and you have lived your entire life under conditions specifically designed to make that distinction impossible to locate. I am not telling you this because I expect you to understand it now. I am telling you because I believe that one day, in a moment of crisis, some part of you will remember that someone once told you the difference exists. And that memory, the amber eyes held the boys with an attention that was absolute and unperforming, may be sufficient. He stood then, straightening with that precise, unhurried motion that Anakin had spent days studying. He looked at Kagan. Take care of him, he said, not as a request, not quite as a command, as a statement of expectation from one serious being to another. Kagan met his eyes. We will do our best. I know, Data said. I am asking you to ensure that your best includes honesty. He will receive a great deal of training. He will receive considerably less truth. I am asking you to mind the difference. Then he walked out of the courtyard, through the narrow street, and into the amber afternoon of Tatooine. And Anakin watched him go with the particular feeling of someone watching. A door closed that they had not realized they needed to keep open. He thought about Data constantly in the years that followed. Not always consciously. Not always in ways he could have named or articulated to Obi-Wan or the Council or Padme, who knew most of his interior life and still did not know all of it, but in the compressed, formative way that certain early encounters become structural. Not memories exactly, but load-bearing elements. Things the rest of the architecture rests on without knowing it. He thought about him during the temple training, when masters spoke of attachment, as though it were a design, flaw to be corrected rather than a capacity to be understood. He thought about him on Geonosis, when Padme fell from the gunship and his heart performed a maneuver that no Jedi philosophy had prepared him for. He thought about him on Tatooine a second time, kneeling in the sand beside his mother's body, feeling something dark and enormous and hungry opening in his chest, and understanding with terrible clarity that he had not remembered the difference when it mattered. He had not remembered it, but he had not forgotten it either. It lived in him the way things live in people who received them before they had the language to process or reject them. Below argument, below theology, below the Jedi Code and Palpatine's whispered counsel, and his own desperate love, a small, precise voice that said, "This is fear, not love. They are not the same." He did not always listen to it, but it was always there. The Clone Wars were in their second year when Data reappeared. Anakin was 20 years old, a Jedi Knight, a general, and a man who was beginning to understand that the war he was fighting had geometries that extended far beyond the battlefields he was given. He was on Coruscant between campaigns, walking the lower city, levels alone in civilian clothes, something Obi-Wan technically discouraged and practically understood. When he turned a corner in the warehouse district near the Senate building's underbelly and found an android sitting on a crate, reading what appeared to be a datapad, dressed in the same slightly scorched black uniform from 11 years ago, completely unchanged. Anakin stopped walking. Data looked up. "Hello, Anakin. You haven't aged," Anakin said, because it was the first thing his mind produced. "I do not age," Data said. "It is one of the more straightforward aspects of my existence." He set the datapad down. "You have changed considerably. I've had a complicated decade. So I observe." Data studied him with those amber eyes that had always made Anakin feel simultaneously seen and examined, not unpleasantly, but with an honesty that most people's eyes withheld out of social courtesy. "You are tired. Not physically, your conditioning is excellent. Existentially, you are tired of questions that have no clean answers." Anakin laughed. It came out shorter and harder than he intended. That's one way to put it. He sat down on the crate beside Data without being invited. The way he had sat beside him in Tatooine's cooling nights a decade ago. How are you here? How are you still here? The entity responsible for my presence in this universe has not seen fit to retrieve me, Data said. I have, in the intervening years, found this arrangement acceptable. This galaxy is a brief, characteristic pause. Remarkable. I have learned a great deal. Have you been watching me? Periodically, Data said, without apology. I was on Geonosis. I was not close enough to intervene, and I am not certain intervention would have been appropriate. But I was present. He looked at Anakin steadily. I was there when you returned to Tatooine. The warehouse district hummed around them. Somewhere above, the city planet continued its incomprehensible roar of commerce and politics and lives stacked upon lives. Anakin said nothing for a long moment. I know what I did, he said finally. On Tatooine. After my mother. I know that you know, Data said. That is not what concerns me. He turned on the crate to face Anakin more directly, a gesture so human in its deliberateness that it always caught Anakin slightly off guard. What concerns me is that you have interpreted what happened as evidence that I was wrong, that the distinction I described to you is false, that fear and love are, in fact, the same thing, because in that moment you could not separate them. Anakin's jaw tightened. Weren't they? No, Data said. They were not. What you felt for your mother was love. What you felt when you found her was grief. What you did afterward was fear that grief would destroy you if you did not transform it into something with a target. He held Anakin's eyes with absolute steadiness. You did not fail because you loved her. You did not fail because you grieved. You failed, Anakin, because no one had ever taught you what to do with grief except suppress it or act on it. Those are not the only options. Anakin looked at his mechanical hand. He had not told Data about the hand. Data was looking at it with an expression of quiet recognition, not surprise, not pity, but the careful attention of someone filing information precisely. What are the other options? Anakin asked. Carry it, Data said simply. Grief does not require resolution. It requires acknowledgement. You do not have to stop loving someone to stop being destroyed by losing them. You only have to allow the love and the loss to coexist without demanding that one of them win. The words landed in Anakin the way Data's words always had, not with immediate comprehension, but with a delayed wait, sinking through layers, finding purchase in places he didn't know were waiting for them. I have dreams, Anakin said quietly. It was the most he had told anyone. About Padme, about losing her. Data was quiet for 3 full seconds. I know, he said. I am not certain I can help you with that. But I can tell you this. The dream is not a prophecy. It is a fear wearing a prophecy's clothes. He paused. Do not let it make decisions for you. Above them, Coruscant blazed with its million lights. Somewhere in the Senate, Palpatine was having dinner with a junior senator and being, by all accounts, charming. Somewhere in the Jedi Temple, Obi-Wan was writing a mission report and worrying about his former Padawan in the specific way he had developed for the purpose. Somewhere across the city, Padme Amidala was alive and well and entirely unaware that her husband was sitting in the warehouse district, receiving counsel from an android from another universe. Anakin sat with Data in the dark and breathed, and for a moment the fear was slightly quieter than the love. The message came through a channel that shouldn't have existed. Anakin was on the Resolute, 3 weeks out from Coruscant, running tactical assessments for the Outer Rim sieges with Rex, and a room full of clone officers who had learned to read their generals' moods with the precision of men whose survival occasionally depended on it. Rex had noted, without comment, that Skywalker had been quieter than usual since returning from Coruscant, not the focused quiet of pre-battle concentration. The other kind, the kind that meant something was happening behind the eyes that hadn't found its way to the surface yet. The message arrived on a frequency no Republic communication system used. It carried no encryption signature, no sender identification, no routing data that the ship's systems could trace. It was simply there, the way Data had always simply been there, without explanation, without apology, as a fact the universe had decided to insert into the existing order of things. It contained 4 words. Remember what you are. Anakin stared at the message for a long time. Then he closed it, filed it somewhere below conscious thought. and returned to the tactical assessment. Rex watched him from across the room and said nothing, which was one of the many reasons Anakin trusted him. The dreams accelerated in the weeks that followed. He knew their shape by now, had cataloged their specific geography, the way a soldier catalogs a recurring battlefield. Padme, fire, his own hands, doing things he could not prevent. He woke from them with his heart, performing its now familiar emergency protocols, and lay in the dark of his bunk, listening to the Resolute's engines and trying to locate the boundary between the dream and the fear and the thing that was neither. The thing that was simply love existing under intolerable pressure. The dream is not a prophecy. It is a fear wearing a prophecy's clothes. He heard Data's voice with a clarity that surprised him. Not as memory exactly, but as presence. The way certain voices become internal, become part of the architecture of how you think. He pressed his mechanical hand against the cold wall of his cabin and breathed. He did not sleep again that night, but he did not act on the fear either. He was beginning to understand the smallest possible victory, and possibly the most important kind. Data was waiting for him on Coruscant when the Outer Rim campaign ended. Not in the warehouse district this time. In the public gardens near the Senate building. Sitting on a stone bench in the gray pre-dawn light, watching the air traffic move in its endless streams above the city. He looked, as he always looked, entirely out of place and entirely untroubled by this fact. An elderly Ithorian walking a small creature on a leash gave him a wide berth without appearing to know why. Anakin sat beside him without preamble. "You sent that message." "I did," Data said. "How?" "I have had several years to study the communication infrastructure of this planet," Data said. "The technical details are not important. What is important is whether you received it at a useful moment." Anakin looked at his hands, flesh and metal, the two materials his life had been built from. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "Ask me in 6 months." Data nodded, accepting this as a reasonable answer. Around them, the gardens were beginning to fill with the early risers of Coruscant, Senate aides, Jedi younglings on supervised walks, workers beginning shifts that the upper city never saw, life conducting itself with the stubborn normalcy that wars somehow never fully extinguished. "Something is coming," Anakin said. It wasn't a question. "I can feel it. In the Force. Something enormous and wrong. And I don't." He stopped. Started again. "The Chancellor has been." "I know," Data said quietly. Anakin turned to look at him. "What do you know?" "I know that Palpatine is not what he presents himself to be," Data said. "I have observed him for years. From positions that afforded me angles of observation that your orders, protocols have not." He said it without drama, without the weight of revelation. Simply, precisely, the way he had always said things. "I am not Force-sensitive. I cannot confirm your order's specific concerns. But I am a being of considerable observational capacity, and what I have observed is a man who has engineered this war with the patience of someone who intended it to end in a specific configuration." Anakin went very still. "He cares about you," Data continued. "This is genuine, I believe, or as genuine as such a person is capable of. It makes him more dangerous to you, not less. Affection is the most effective vector for the kind of influence he is attempting." He paused. "He will offer you something. He may have already begun. And what he offers will be real. The thing he promises will be something you genuinely need. And he will be genuinely capable of providing it, or convincing you that he is." "The dreams," Anakin said. His voice was very quiet. "Yes." The gardens hummed around them. A pair of Senate guards walked past on their rotation, glancing at the two figures on the bench with the professional disinterest of men, paid to notice things and trained not to react to them. "If I go to the council," Anakin said slowly, "they won't. They don't trust me. Not completely. Mace Windu has never." "The council's trust in you is irrelevant," Data said. "What matters is whether you trust yourself." He looked at Anakin with those amber eyes that had been looking at him, on and off, for 11 years. "You are not the boy who sat in the desert asking me why people hurt each other. You are also not the man the fear is trying to make you into. You are something in between, something that is still being decided." A pause. "That is not a weakness. That is the precise moment in which choice is possible. Before the decision, choice exists. After the decision, only consequence." Anakin pressed his hands together, flesh against metal, warmth against cold. I'm afraid of what I'll do, he said. If it comes down to it. If it's her life against. I know, Data said. Does it get easier? The fear. Data was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried that quality. Anakin had never fully been able to name. Not warmth exactly, not calculation, but the thing that lived with such precision in the territory between them. No, he said. It does not get easier. But I have observed, across a great many beings in a great many circumstances, that the fear does not have to be absent for the right choice to be made. You do not need to stop being afraid, Anakin. You need only to be, in the moment of decision, slightly more yourself than you are afraid. Anakin was quiet for a long time. The sun was beginning to rise over Coruscant, not a real sunrise. Technically, given the extent of the city's light pollution, but a brightening, a shift in the quality of the air, the suggestion of a new day conducting itself with or without anyone's permission. What happens to you? Anakin asked. He couldn't finish the sentence. There were too many ways it ended. Whatever happens, what happens to you? I will remain, Data said simply. I am not certain for how long, or to what purpose. The entity who placed me here has not communicated his intentions with any clarity. A pause. He rarely does. I have come to accept that this is fundamental to his nature rather than a specific discourtesy toward me. Anakin almost smiled. Hugh sounds exhausting. He is, Data agreed, extremely. For a moment they sat in something. That was not quite comfort and not quite peace, but was the thing that exists between two beings who have known each other long, enough to require nothing from each other except presence. An android from a dead future and a man balanced on the edge of one. The garden around them continued its morning rituals. The city above them continued its incomprehensible roar. Then Anakin stood, straightened, put his shoulders back in the way he had learned from years of being a general. The physical grammar of a man deciding to meet what was coming. I'm going to talk to the council, he said. Properly. About Palpatine. About everything. He looked down at Data. I don't know if it'll work. No, Data agreed. You do not. But it's what I'm supposed to do. It is what you would do, Data said carefully. If you were being slightly more yourself then. Afraid. He looked up at Anakin with an expression that contained, in its precise and unperforming way, something that had lived in it since a 9-year-old boy had walked out from between two market stalls in Mos Espa and asked him if he was going to hurt anyone. That is sufficient, Anakin. It has always been sufficient. Anakin looked at him for a moment. Then he nodded, once. The nod of a man filing something important, in a place where he will find it when he needs it, and walked away through the brightening gardens toward the Jedi Temple. Data watched him go. He sat in the garden for a long time after Anakin disappeared from view, watching the city conduct its morning, running the calculations that he always ran, probabilities, variables, the branching geometries of consequence. He was not optimistic, in the precise sense that optimism requires a willingness to discount unfavorable data. The data was not favorable. The variables were numerous. The entity who had placed him here had, as usual, provided no guidance on outcomes. But he had observed, across 11 years and 2 conversations in 1,000 small moments in the Tatooine dark, a boy who asked real questions and a man who was still, underneath everything, asking them. That was not nothing. In Data's considerable experience, it was rarely nothing. In the end, the galaxy did not turn on a battle or a prophecy or the grand machinery of the Force alone. It turned, in part, on a conversation in a garden at dawn, on words spoken 11 years earlier in desert dust by a being the Force could not see or touch or account for. Anakin Skywalker went to the Jedi Council. He told them what he knew about Palpatine, not everything, not the dreams, not the private geography of his fear, but enough. Enough for Mace Windu to move, enough to change the timing, to alter the sequence of events by hours that would become, in retrospect, everything. It did not save everyone. It never does. The Clone Wars left their marks on the galaxy, in ways that would take generations to fully inventory. Order 66 came, in a diminished form, and the Jedi were wounded in ways they would spend decades recovering from. Padme lived. Anakin lived, not unchanged, not undamaged, but alive and present and still. Underneath the damage, recognizably himself. Data remained on Coruscant for 3 more years. He was seen occasionally in the lower city, in the gardens, in the archive districts, a pale, gold figure moving through crowds with unhurried precision, reading, observing, filing the galaxies. Endless data in a positronic brain that never tired and never forgot. Then one morning he was not there, and no one who might have noticed could agree on exactly when he had gone. Hugh, characteristically, left no explanation. Somewhere in the trajectory of a better future. An android who had once fallen from a clear Tatooine sky carried the memory of a boy who had asked him real questions, and found, in that memory, something that functioned very much like gratitude. The Force, as always, moved in ways that defied accounting. But sometimes, in the spaces where it could not reach, something else moved instead, and sometimes that was enough.